so now that we've kind of done a few different techniques, we're gonna work on some trees. And trees are gonna be kind of our next step in creating some of our tools that we're gonna use to actually create a full landscaping and a full painting. So I'm actually gonna use directly from my palette here, just because I like using these colors. I think this one is called Moon Glow. It's just one of my favorites. So I've got that as an option. That's a good one too. Kind of just want to test out these colors and see which one I want to use. I want to use a darker color. So in your palette, if you have a black, that will work great. If you have a Payne's Gray, that one would be a really good one to use. I think that one's a pretty good, I think that one's a Payne's Gray. So I'm going to use something that's going to be darker than this wash color here that we started with. And I'm going to show you how to do a pine tree. Pine trees are going to be really versatile for you to use because they show up in a lot of different types of landscapes. Even beach scenes, you can use that in any kind of water scene as well. Obviously, a forest or something like that, this is going to be pretty common to do. So I'm going to take some of my paint here, and I'm pulling from my water and just kind of dropping some water on this little block of color here. Now, if I wanted to kind of come out here, I can use this area right here to sort of mix with a little bit of water and kind of give myself a little spot here. Since I'm going to be painting pretty small scale, I don't really need a huge amount of paint or a huge amount of water. So that's perfectly fine to do. So I'm using my small brush here. Now you can use your larger round brush as well to do this. Same technique, it's just going to be a little bit different look. So this is really going to teach you how to use these round brushes, because there's a lot of different ways to hold your brush and a lot of different brush strokes that you can use to actually create a certain look. So what I'm going to do is sort of look at my brush and make sure that it's not too thick or has too much water on it. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of look here, and I'm going to give myself my starting point for my tree, which is just a vertical line. And you see how skinny this is, and that's because I'm only using the tip of this brush. Okay, so this is just going to give me my setup and my guideline. And then I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to come just a little bit further down than the very top of this little line. And pine trees are going to have that kind of triangular shape to them. They're going to be a little thicker in the middle and a little thinner out on the branches. So what I'm doing is very light, kind of organic brush strokes. And you can see how when I come out to the edge here, I'm pulling my brush up a little bit more, almost where it's not even touching it. In the middle, see how I'm pressing down and it flattens the brush, and it creates a much bigger area where your brush hits the paper. So you can kind of use that technique to give you a larger area. You can even hold your brush parallel with the paper and kind of pull out from there. But I like that kind of sparseness of the tree. And now, since our tree is still kind of wet, I can pull directly from my paint and use that wet on wet technique that we just did and darken a few areas here to where it looks like it's got some shadow, it's got some light. I think that variation just looks really nice. You can go back and kind of thicken different areas, and see I'm kind of just stippling, using a stippling technique with my brush almost. So this is easy to do with this smaller brush here. So it's about, you know, that contrast between full and sparse, and it's also about that contrast with the textures and the value. So I like, you know, using contrast with this. So let's try using our larger brush and see how that looks. So I'm gonna grab some more paint, put it here on the palette, just sort of mix it up. Now you can see with the larger brush, I've got a nice, you know, fine tip here. This brush is just gonna hold more water and more paint. Okay, so I'm gonna do that line again, pretty skinny. You may wanna just kind of practice doing a couple lines like that with your brush. I'm kind of holding my brush like I would a pencil anyways. So now I'm gonna show you how this brush creates a little bit bigger brush strokes here. So because this is a much bigger brush, you can always make your tree a little bit taller if you need to. This is very loose and very abstract, which is one of probably the easiest ways to do trees, because that's how they can translate and all look a little different when you do them all together. And so I'm also alternating this on each side, each branch. So this one's gonna be here, and so the next one I'm gonna do over here is a little different. So it's, instead of making them the same, like this, so that's not as organic and interesting as something like that. So what you want to really do is make them all alternating. And you see how this is, instead of just a line or a swoop, you see how I'm creating texture in each one of those branches. And you can continue to grab some of your paint and your water and kind of mix that up. And using that wet on wet technique, you can kind of create some fun stuff within that tree there. Pine trees don't have to be just a big fluffy triangle. They can be sparse, they can be tall and skinny. They can be a lot of different looks because there are so many variations of pine trees. So, you know, this is with our smaller brush, which you could absolutely create this look with this larger brush. But this is just kind of some of the different things that you can do with these brushes for that. So I'm going to use some colors here to kind of give you an idea of how I want to do that. I'm going to mix up some darker colors here for the trunk of the tree. And I'm going to be using my larger round brush. And I like using this brush to create a lot of the leaves on the tree, and I'll show you how we do that. But the first thing I like to do is just kind of start with just a basic trunk. And I'm going to start from the bottom and go up. And I'm going to be using the very tip of this brush. The harder you press down on the brush, the thicker your line's going to be. So if you pull up on that brush to where it's not got as much contact on your paper, you're going to go from a thick line to a thin line. Okay, now you can thicken this up. You can add some more to it if you want. So I'm going to kind of just pull that up. And as I go up a little bit higher, I'm going to make it a little skinnier. Fill that in just a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to give it a branch, kind of off to the side here. And again, I'm just using the very, very tip of this brush. And right where it connects with the base trunk, I'm going to kind of fill that in just a little bit. Let's maybe give him another little branch here. And you see how my lines are very squiggly, and they're not straight, and they're not perfect. And they're almost not even fully connecting with the paper. I mean, you could kind of have fun with this and create a bunch of different types of branches some that you can't quite even see because we are going to kind of cover these up a little bit when they fully dry. So that's pretty good. And this could be, you know, you could do this if you're going to do a winter scene or something like that where there's no leaves on the tree. All right, so this is going to dry very quickly because I didn't really use a whole lot of paint, a lot of water. I'm going to pick up some of my green. That is my favorite green, and it is called Green Appetite Genuine by Daniel Smith. This is one of my favorite granulating colors. So I use this one a lot, but I do believe in using a lot of different types of green. So for creating the leaves and the spaces on the tree here, one thing that you want to keep in mind is you want to definitely have some negative space in here. You want to leave some of this paper back behind here showing through, just kind of like what we did with our pine trees. Even though in the middle they're very thick and filled in on the edges here, they obviously have a lot of open spaces. So we want to create the same thing with this type of tree. And we're going to be using a lot of different movements within this brush, and I like the bigger brush because it's going to be able to give me the option to be able to press down. And I'm not necessarily doing a certain pattern, kind of using the thickness of the brush. And also then coming back and using the very tip of the brush to kind of maybe create these outer spaces for the tree where the leaves are not as close together. So kind of the same similar concept as that, as your pine tree. And I'm not really looking at a specific tree to pull this from, so I'm just kind of doing this from my head. And I'm just sort of doing a circular shape here. And while this area is still wet, this is a great time to grab some more paint, mix it with a little bit of water, and tap that into some certain areas, because that's going to kind of create those shadows and those highlights. And you see all this kind of negative space that's left here in the tree? That's really good. If I was going to do a really heavy shadow on the tree, then I would be, you know, picking a certain area and kind of emphasizing that area with a lot darker colors. And this is if this was a seasonal tree, so if this was going to be fall, then I would be using a lot of different shades of red and brown and orange and even some yellow, which is really fun. All right, so that's good. I want to make sure I have a nice combination of some of these smaller shapes, like these little dots here, and then some of these larger areas that are just sort of filled in. So this can be a little tricky with trying to figure out how to get that balance between all of these different textures and shapes. And that is simply just going to come with time and practice.